What is going on, everyone? Hope you're doing well. Monday. Hopefully, it's not too bad. I think I say the same thing every single time, right? Start a video. So, today we are going to continue our story of Irena Sendler. Over the weekend, I have a couple Polish channel members, and I asked them, "Hey, have you heard of her?" Because she's Polish. And they were like, "Yeah, she's taught in school." So when I was younger, no, I think I always have stories about when I was younger, right? So when I was in high school or whatever, so much of what we learned in history, in social studies class, excuse me, was about like white guys, right? Because in this country, let's face it, for the first few hundred years of our history as a country, there were so many laws keeping, you know, people out of government and stuff if you weren't a white guy. So in recent years, especially with the textbook that we are using, I think they do a great job of trying to find stories that are important, but also a diverse group. So we've had, were they from Laos? Laotian immigrants. We talked about Harriet Tubman. So a lot of women, a lot of men of, non-whites. So this is another one where, I don't know, I guess when I was growing up, we learned about this guy, Oscar Schindler. And I do have a Wikipedia, not a great source, but it's a super easy find. So this guy named Oscar Schindler, who did something very similar to Irena Sendler, and he was able to help save the lives of about 1,200, right there, 1,200 Jews. So he would employ them and keep their name secret. That's where the list comes from. Actually, let me share this with you. There was a movie, very famous movie in the 90s, like super famous. Steven Spielberg, a famous director, he directed it. Liam Neeson, the guy from the Taken series, like he was the star. Like this was way before he became like an action hero, going after people who kidnapped his daughter. So it was really famous. 1,200 Jews were saved by this one man, because he felt passionate about it. So we're going to read about how around this time, a woman named Irena Sendler was kind of unearthed, I guess. That's one of our words. Like there were people doing research and they found out about this woman. And I'm not saying the number of lives is significant. I mean, both Oscar Schindler and Irena Sendler were really putting their lives on the line to save others. So that doesn't matter, kudos to them or whatever. But it seems like she might have saved even more lives. And there wasn't a movie made about her. And she's talking about like saving the lives of children. Some will say 2,000, some will say 2,500. It's somewhere around there. And it's impressive. And I think based on the video we watched on Friday, you know a little bit about her, right? And her life was super close to coming to an end. All right, let's get into this. I'm going to share this. And we can see we started, at least looking at this picture on Friday, we didn't get too far. We didn't even talk about the author, which I would like to do first, or at least where she is from, because that is a little problematic as well. But China Kroll lives and works in Israel. She's the editorial assistant for thejewishwomen.org. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Israel here too, because you really can't talk about the Holocaust without talking about Israel. So give me a minute here to talk about where this is. Let me share this with you. We got a Google map here. This is a pretty good source. But if you look at Israel, it's right in the middle here and surrounded by Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq. That's Saudi Arabia right there. Got a little bit too far. I didn't want to do that. But if you notice, even Turkey right here, like this, Israel is a country that's probably like mostly Jewish, right? Made up of mostly Jewish citizens, surrounded by so this is the Arab world, but they are mostly governments that are definitely Muslim, right? I mean, I don't want to speak for all the countries, but let's talk about at least the citizens of that country. The religion they probably practice, by and large, is Islam. So they're Muslim. And what happened was after World War II, the United States, England, the winning powers thought, whoa, Europe might not be a safe place for people who are Jewish. You know, a lot of evidence saying that it wasn't. So they said, let's go back to the homeland of the Jewish people and give them back that land. So that's how you have the creation of modern day Israel. It was like 1947, 1948. United States, the West, right, said, all right, you can move back there. One little problem. There were a lot of people who weren't Jewish living there already. And so they were forced off their land, right? And they were mostly Muslim. So, you know, can't draw too many conclusions, but one reason why that area, many of its citizens don't like the West, don't like the United States, is because I'm making this super, super simple, but the United States was responsible for forcing people who were Muslim off their land in Israel in favor of people who were Jewish. Okay. So that is even carrying over to today and, you know, the 9/11 attacks. I mean, they're not directly related, but so Israel, Judaism, World War II. If anybody has any questions on that, I think I've said everything I know about it, but I mean, it is a little bit more complicated than that. So let's get into this article here, but that is the aftermath of the Holocaust. And I mean, it's not like it brought the world together, right? There were good intentions, but it upset a lot of people. It upset an entire region. All right, but we're not getting, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this class, talking about Israel, modern day Israel or whatever, 6-Day War. We're talking about Irena Sendler here and saving people who are Jewish. So this background right here, I am going to assume that if you've been paying attention in class, like the stuff that I'm about to read in the blue, at least I can't highlight everything. Yeah, okay, everything. Just this first paragraph, like this is going to be familiar to you, hopefully. The Nazis party's plan to persecute, segregate, and exterminate Europe's Jewish citizens first required my goodness, I can read, I promise, Jewish people to wear identifying armbands, and next restricted their movements. The Nazis then established ghettos, or enclosed areas, for all Jewish people so that German soldiers could keep watch. One of these ghettos was the Warsaw Ghetto, which rose up against the Nazis in 1943. All right, I cannot even begin to pronounce this name. And luckily, she's a small part of this, but let's just call her Elizabeth, was just 5 years old when she was placed in a carpenter's box and smuggled out of the Warsaw Ghetto. She was placed with a Polish family on the Aryan side of the wall, and the young woman who carried her out of the ghetto added tiny little Elizabeth's name, parents' name, and new address to a piece of tissue paper on which were written the details of other children she had smuggled out. The jar was later buried under an apple tree in the backyard of a friend's home. So she took great care in remembering, because the idea was, as she's trying to help these children, she would get them out of the Warsaw Ghetto. We're going to talk about why she was even allowed in there. Some people may know from the video, but it has to do with typhus. And so she kept great care of trying to match the children to their former parents, right? So, hey, you're only going here to live temporarily. Once the war is over, you'll be reunited with your parents. As we know, most people aren't going to survive, right? Most of the people will go off to the camps and die, and these little kids will be orphaned. Hopefully they'll have good homes already. But that was the idea, is like, this is just a temporary fix. They knew things could go badly. So if we could save some children, that would be a good thing. Next paragraph here. The young woman was 29-year-old Irena Sendler, a Polish Catholic social worker who saved 2,500 Jewish children from the Nazis. So on Friday's video, I mistakenly called her a nun. She was not a nun, but she was a Christian social worker. Okay. So not a nun, who saved 2,500 Jewish children from the Nazis. Unlike the names in the jar, which were unearthed soon after the Nazis' defeat, Irena's story and that of her fellow rescuers remained buried for nearly 60 years. That began to change in 1999 when 4 students at rural Uniontown High School in Kansas began researching possible projects for the National History Day competition. The students, Megan Stewart, Elizabeth Chambers, Jessica Shelton, and Sabrina Coons, were intrigued by a sentence their teacher, Norman Conrad, showed them in an article from U.S. News and World Report, which simply stated Irena Sendler saved 2,500 children from the Warsaw Ghetto, 1942-1943. Both teacher and students were convinced that it must have been a typo. How could one person save 2,500 children from the walled and heavily guarded ghetto? They assumed the article had meant to say 250. When you look at her, Conrad told an interviewer, you can't imagine how she could walk past Nazi guards carrying a child in a gunny sack. How'd she do it? That's basically just like a backpack there. So Irena Sendler, that last name right there, was just 4'11". Her lively, intelligent black eyes set in a round, smiling face. She was beautiful. And in taped interviews, one can see a warm yet quietly determined individual. Still, her appearance more closely resembled a favorite doll than a fearless resistance leader. How did she find the courage to smuggle out living, breathing, and sometimes crying children past vicious, heavily armed guards? Yeah, that's the problem. And like Hollywood or whatever, they will say, never work with children or animals, because you really can't trust what they're going to do. They don't say their lines on cue, which reminds me of Anne Frank's Annex. It's like, you don't want babies living in that annex, and I don't think you want a cat. Yet they had a cat. Maybe it was a really well-behaved cat, right? Moshi, maybe well-behaved, but you just can never tell what they're going to do. So she was carrying out, and we saw carpentry and any means possible. We saw in the video there were other items like just smuggle them out. And we'll talk about why she was even allowed into the ghetto to begin with. Maybe I haven't said it, so maybe I should say it now. So we have talked about typhus. It is this disease spread by lice. And if you get it without treatment, you can run this super high fever, dehydrate, all that stuff, and die, right? And that's probably what killed Margot and Anne, probably, right? Typhus. There was a typhus outbreak. So the Nazis were concerned when you have, it was like 400,000 people living in a square mile, which is not a lot for 400,000 people. Very poor conditions. They were afraid that that typhus outbreak, which was affecting the Warsaw Ghetto, like they were fine. Like, hey, great, make our job easily. If, you know, people are going to die from that, it's the people we want dead anyways. But what they were afraid of is that it would spread outside of the ghetto and actually affect, you know, Germans they didn't want to kill. So hopefully that is a little bit of insight into Irena Sendler. We will continue tomorrow and Wednesday probably, and maybe even Thursday. This week, obviously, is the bulk of it is like the main objective of this week is going to be that MEA science testing. So, you know, do your best on that. Classes will be shortened. Our schedule will be all messed up for the next 3 days after this. So basically the two big things I would like you to focus on is hopefully you have your study guide in for the new words. Friday, maybe earlier, there will be a test available that you can take on those new words. And then the Irena Sendler Google form. So those are going to be like the three. Most people have their study guides in, but those are going to be the three main objectives for this week, along with the MEAs. All right.